So Jen, could you help us do that? Good morning, people. So, the theme is craft, and I don't know if y'all are familiar with this, but the second definition of craft is a boat or a vessel. So we are going to craft a craft.
Hi. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Creative Mornings team, for inviting me to speak and making everything so nice. I've been nurtured. And, Studio 2-3 is the perfect place for me to talk about craft. As we talked about, I have a studio here. My practice as an artist has flourished, and it definitely because I feel like I've been able to mine what I'm going to talk about is the craft process here. And I use ink and printmaking and color. I am fully committed to color. In that Creative Morning profile, you pick what you do, what you're an expert at. And I kept trying to get fluorescent pink, but it wasn't in the drop-down menu. In collecting ideas for this talk, the obvious questions I wanted to address, what is craft? And gosh, it's such a sprawling, contradictory topic. What do I want to say about it? What can I say that, would be worth you getting up at this time? Before I want to start talking about the ideas today, I want to mention my process for preparing. Because I picked this time to talk craft because it felt like it was a really nice wrap up for my year as artist in residence at the business school. Because what I was bringing there was the process of creativity. So my process for getting ready for today was I talked to a lot of artists I admire. And I just want to thank them for thinking this kind of abstract topic with me. In some ways, craft is so tangible, but at the same time, people who are drawn to it do it, and you do it almost fully with your mind and your body, maybe like cycling at a fast enough speed. And so talking about it kind of was a step back, and I want to thank Lee Suggs and Shelley Jones and Diane Nort for spending time around these topics. I used Stuart Kastenbaum's book called The View from Here, great title, and he hosts a podcast for the Consortium of Craft Schools called Make Time, which is fantastic, and it was clarifying and inspiring. I also drew on the podcast done by Jocelyn Clay called Hurry Slowly, which talks a lot about making time to let ideas happen. Any research I do, I go to books. I am a reader. I am the people of the book, and by reading and family, and I, wound up finding ideas in surprising places. Like a lot of people, I've kind of fallen down the rabbit hole of these newly translated books by Roberto Bolaño, and he led me back to someone who I have always loved reading, Borges, and found surprising things in there. And if anyone is looking for a good group of crazy novels, go to Angela Carter. There are also awesome books about craft. It's an expansive history, and there's extensive theories. Because remember, craft is like core to the human experience. There are 40,000-year-old pieces of jewelry found in Kenya, and gold made out of just every material around. So craft is the human condition. So to start, craft is a noun and it's a verb, right? It is what we make and it is how we make it. We say her chair is ingeniously crafted. Furniture making is her craft. To be crafty is to make things by hand. To be crafty is to be skilled. Yet crafty can imply a kind of tainted cleverness, deception. we might distrust craft, consider her the lesser of her glamorous sister, the fine arts. And I'll talk about that a little later. Craft, as kind of came up, with our exercise, is how we travel. By spacecraft, we'll reach the stars. In a pleasure craft, we pass a luxurious day sailing. Small craft mornings are not just for little boats, they're for everybody by the water. Craft is what we journey with and what we journey within. In one of the short stories by Jorge Luis Borges called The Rose of Paracelsus, a man comes to aged Paracelsus and asks to be his disciple. It's kind of an act of devotion. He drops a bag of coins on the table. And Paracelsus shuns the gold and rejects the man, saying, "If it is gold that interests you, you will never be my disciple." And the visitor protests. He says, no, gold is of no interest to me. I'm just making this offering to show you I'm serious. I want to walk beside you on the path. I want you to teach me the art. I want to walk beside you on the path that leads to the capital S, the stone. Like Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Paracelsus answers him. He says, the path is the stone. The point of departure is the stone. Every step you take is the goal you seek. I asked Diane Nort what she thinks about when she thinks about craft. Many of you know Diane's work. She weaves blankets in Charles City County. The yarn she uses to weave her blankets has been spun from wool she sheared from her sheep, from merino sheep. These sheep she raises on her farm, and this is the farm where she lives, the land she cares for, the land where her family grows up, where she raises and lives with her family. Diane spoke about the question she is most often asked. How long did it take you to make that blanket? And Diane's answer is complete. My whole life. It took my whole life to make this blanket. Every minute of every day. Craft is not the time you make for what you do, Diane said. It is the time you take. Craft is everything Diane does from field to blanket. It is the process of developing and using her materials. Craft is the means by which she travels the boat of living her life's journey. Paula Shear, I'm sure revered here, right? Legendary designer at Pentagram, describes her craft as a process that relies not on how to, but on what if. Shear talks about all the things she makes to make the one thing worth keeping. Shear is adamant that you have to be bad to be good. She says you have to struggle and have accidents in order to make discoveries. She calls this the graphic design investment in research and development, R&D. Shear says you have to give time to an open-ended process in order to yield valuable material for future projects. In exploring craft with friends for today's talk, I asked what ultimately makes a craft object successful. What's good? What's valuable? We talked about beauty. We talked about elegance. These are common aspects of perceived quality in craft. Maybe kind of more in craft than in some other things. We talked about utility and the manner in which an object's utility is fulfilled are factors in what makes something a good craft. But neither beauty nor utility seem necessary or sufficient. You can think about those crazy jugs with faces. I don't know that beauty or even use are what they're about. But we kept coming back to the idea that for craft objects in particular, value is connected to quality arising from the skill of the maker applied to materials. Time and materials. The maker's skill in the process of the craft is skill developed over time and deployed with time. Developed with materials, whether we're talking about familiar craft materials like clay and fiber, or unexpected resources like plastic debris or foam wire. Time, discovery, materials. In thinking about crafts that are useful, but simultaneously useless if you're thinking about, if you're using a productivity that measure of utility. It's like useful, people want it, it serves something, but it's not about productivity improvement. I thought about the traditions of kite making across Asia. I read about a 70-year-old Malaysian master, Shafi bin Yuso, so if you are looking to have your mind blown, and he makes what are called moon kites, traditional Malaysian moon kites, and they're vibrant. They can be as big as 3 meters, and they can fly in the air. He talks about, he talks pretty plainly in his interview. I mean, he's, as I said, 70. And what he wanted to say to the interviewer was, if you don't do it every day, you lose your technique. You need passion and patience to make kites. So it's about commitment and how he spends his days. So he's a master of his time, but he's also the master of the bamboo, the string, the paper, the paste, ribbon, and of the wind on which his kites are designed to ride. The investigation of materials is important to the craft process. It's kind of something that I think really defines the way when people find a home in craft. Making is a partnership of materials, curiosity, and inspiration. Stuart Kestenbaum, poet laureate of Maine and former director of Haystack, says, each act of creativity is an exploration in the unknown. He talks about making clay vessels. That's something he does for pleasure outside of his leadership and writing, which is his main art. And he says, there is a pot as it went into the kiln. There's the way it looks when it comes out. And sometimes it's not what we are expecting, and we are disappointed. Other times it is changed in a way that can delight us. And there is that middle ground, the piece that didn't meet our expectations, and perhaps we need to drop what we are expecting and look at what is. So I want to call that the 3 bears of making: the as expected, the worse than expected, and the unexpected. The last is where we want to be in the craft process, where the delights and surprises and thrills of maker and material and audience happen. For craft production, for expertise in craft, the work needs to be done. It's you need to court the unexpected and nurture the skill. When I was at the business school, I talked a lot about process. Prototyping is a term that gets used a lot in the arc of product development and business launch. And we always think about prototyping as what you do before you finish, so you make sure you don't fuck up. But Paul here, and for me, prototyping is where that's what the fun is, and that's where all the ideas happen. You do to find ideas, it's not dieting, right? It's nutrition. One way of saying, we were coming up with how do you summarize? So craft isn't teleporting, it's Bruce Chatwin's long walking. Craft process is the long, rocky pilgrimage road to Santiago, transporting, but step by step. It is this labor with materials, this pleasurable, rewarding discovery that makes craft a siren call today, in this second decade of the 21st century. It's the modifier and the action and the go-to zone. It's why we're talking about it today. Craft has come to beer, to food, to local goods for sale. Craft is how we do our work in whatever field and how we spend our downtime. Craft is what we want from others and is what we want from ourselves. We want to know how things are made and we want to make things ourselves. We want to do the work to understand with our hands what we're doing. We crave the pleasure of doing the making. Craft tastes better. Craft speaks to our community. We want to touch the hand that grows our food. In this electronic digital age, we are reclaiming the hand. The original digital format, right? 10 digits, 2 hands. We are sensual creatures. Touch, taste, seeing, hearing, smelling. We only know the world through our senses. We can't, I'm a huge sci-fi fan, but we are not jacking in to William Gibson's Matrix. Not yet. It is still through the hand. As much as we traffic in the seemingly abstract modes of cyberspace and virtual reality, we do so through the use of tangible devices. We operate with our hands. We hold to our heads. We understand with our eyes and ears. Part of the seduction of the smartphone has to be the connection of that warm thing and the beautiful excitement of our eyes. Just like a book, right? Like you touch it and you see it. Craft has gained a new prestige. Like many hierarchies, the ones that subordinated craft are breaking down. Crafts have been considered, for a long time. I say these things and they just seem almost laughable now, but in kind of listening, what did I need to talk about? I need to talk about all those things that craft, people have been fighting about with craft for a long time, Craft have been considered beneath the fine arts of painting, like painting, sculpture, and music, for reasons that just no longer hold. Indictments based on money, utility, gender, race. It's, there's been this kind of subordination, which, like a lot of these kinds of dichotomies, just feel awkward, right? Silly. Like, oh, it's the new world. Crafts traffic with commerce, trade, and business. Fine arts exist outside of money. Crafts incorporate technologies such as the loom, the kiln, the forge, the press, and even the camera. Fine arts don't need mechanical production. Crafts produce objects for function and use. Fine art has no function other than to inspire. Crafts are worked by women. Crafts are creative expression made by those outside of the fine arts world. Enough said, right? Crafts are decorative. Fine art is about deeper beauty. Crafts rely on design. Fine art has meaning. Crafts are popular. Art is rarefied. Only a sequestered idealist would hold on to the ideas that fine art exists today outside of the marketplace. High tech and new media hold an important place in high art as well as in craft. You see, it's museums, galleries, awards, education. Why wouldn't it? It's the materials of our lives today. Even traditional craft materials, iron, textiles, precious metals, you make the list, are fair game to fine arts. That boundary is being permeated. We step back and we say woven fiber for painting canvas. Why is that different than garments or blankets? Pigment made for dye. Why is that different than pigment and ink? You've got sculptors who make dresses like Beverly Sims and Leslie Dill, and quilts like those that came from East Bend community. They're filling the museums. People are thrilled and moved by that work in a way that we used to say that's what art does. The touch of the hand, labor, time, and materials, they give value. Craft now is where the idea of the hand exists, right? So it's gone from being the province of the guilds, the trades, the people who knew the machines. We associate it with the hand, and that's what gives it star power. Hierarchies and dichotomies of craft and art, like many divisions and labels in gender, sexuality, race, and class, are being inverted, flattened, and scrambled. Thank goodness. Ugly and beautiful, high and low, professional and amateur, even entrepreneur and artist are distinctions that are losing their power. as was said, during the last academic year, I served as artist in residence at VCU School of Business, right? Business school. You've seen the billboards, right? Creativity at work. It was my job to foreground creativity in consciousness of students, faculty, and staff. To do so, I relied on making things with members of the business school community rather than doing this, giving a lecture. We bound hundreds of books by hand. I was in a class of 160 students, and we all made books within 40 minutes. I almost tried it here, but it was just too many people. We made more than 1,500 pinback buttons together. And by making things together, the durable lesson about craft process and creativity was apparent. I didn't need to say it. All I had to do was say, sit with me. During one of the early button making sessions set up in the business school atrium, a student blurted out, I only stopped to make one button, but as soon as I started cutting and gluing, I had a million ideas. Lesson learned. My job is done. Creativity is not thinking outside of the box. I would say over and over again when I would go into classrooms at the business school. Creativity is recognizing the boxes that we've set about ourselves, erected with our assumptions, our quick answers, the way we can just move through the world. We make limitations because we have to, and we self-seal doors. Castellan points out that first we make, then we observe, and then we separate. We organize, we divide, we make categories, we put what we have made into boxes, and the boxes are a useful bulwark to against being overwhelmed. But it means we can recognize, using, boxes too gives us a way of understanding, right? Like knowledge from data, forests from trees. But too often we make barriers when we should be making conversations. The boundaries become the accomplishment and the end game. Castellan says, I think every creative act combines what we know and what we don't know. And if we know where we are going when we get out in the process of making, we end up with something that's not interesting anymore. Confirmation is not enough. We want the time spent making to be the time of new opportunities. Seeds harvest for next planting, investment in R&D. So imagine a Venn diagram of 3 boxes. Look at the intersection of art, craft, and curiosity. Magic happens in that unnamed, overlapping place. Cut a doorway in boxes, knock out walls, allow the mind to wander. In the words of George Clinton in Funkadelic, free your mind and your ass will follow. Sail on in your craft. Thank you. Art, craft, and creativity. Or curiosity. I think art, craft, and curiosity. Yeah. Make anyone you want.
So what is your core practice in craft? What do you do day to day or week to week?
Now, I had a long time working with photographic printmaking and really found that a rich way of looking at the world and how we understood the world and how photographs change and define, and really loved the process of printmaking and used photographic materials. But what I was using had a very tight palette, brown and blue, and along the way I learned to screen print and found a home here to be able to keep working. I learned to screen print at Penland during a teacher's retreat, Penland School of Craft. If people are looking for a place to really dig in, that you can't beat it, and it's less than a day's drive from here. And so now what I do is I print on textiles and I make things out of, I call it goods, gifts, and happiness. So
Are you wearing your work?
I am. I'm wearing a pinafore apron, right? That place, always ready to work, always ready to get into it.
Awesome. Anyone else? I have more questions. So. Yes, in the back.
So I'm totally intrigued by the way you mix business and art. I'm classically trained as a marketing person, but still graphic design, taught graphic design. Now I'm in a marketing role, so I want to know a little bit more about how you cross over into those.
So the question is, he's curious to know how she's crossing over between the business and the art world.
Yeah.
When I was working at the business school, Ken Kahn, one of the deans who runs the Artist in Residence program, said that my MBA was my superpower. But when I went into business, when I worked in finance, my superpower was my art training. By typical, whether it's commercial art or fine arts or writing, you do this thing that is so powerful. You do, you review, and you redo. Nabokov talks in his memoir, he talks about life being like this swirling spiral in a marble, and you're always kind of having the perch to look back on all the things you did. And I felt like that was really core in my art practice. I came out of college with this fantastic art and liberal arts education into a recession, and needed to eat, and I went into what was considered a creative field, and for me, consumer goods wasn't a comfortable fit, and so I decided to just really make sure nobody laughed when I told them I was smart, and that I could do interesting work. So I wound up getting an MBA and worked in finance, and that was it was a fantastic learning experience. We had talked about doing the Creative Morning for this topic at the business school, and because of some renovation, there wasn't going to be a big enough space. But that idea of what you learn from those skills and how they complement all these other ways of learning and understanding the world, it was fantastic. So it made a really good career. I did a lot of accounting. Had a small accounting practice that was started by my mother, and my primary clients were creative professionals. I don't know if anybody here was one of my clients. I worked for everybody: GWAR, members of the Richmond Symphony, studio artists, radio stations, galleries, and so it was really could use my communication skills and really was able to learn a lot about art. And now I mostly teach and work as an artist, production artist, and try to keep my, if anyone reads about Amos Kennedy, who works at the ICA, he talks about scaling your lifestyle to what you want to earn. And my husband and I have really made a commitment to that. So, the finance people saying how do I spend less so I can live more, right?
So Alyssa, this maybe dovetails to that. As a designer for most of my career, I have worked in corporate settings as the designer, as the creative person, and at some point when I first started my career, I felt like a lot of the business folks in our community of the workspace sort of would pat you on the head and talk to you as the creative person in the business. How have you navigated? Obviously, you are very colorful, very expressive. When you walk into a room of business people, do you ever feel
I don't wear pantyhose anymore?
Yeah, you're not. She said she doesn't wear pantyhose anymore. So I'm just wondering how you. So as the artist navigating in the business world, are there ways that you handle maybe comments or perceptions that you might get as a woman, as an artist, coming into a business world? I don't know that I always handled it very well as a young career person. I would kind of get snarky with people, and then you don't get invited back to the table maybe. So don't do that. So I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
I may say I don't. I think, again, in this realm where things are breaking down, there's a reason the business school is really doubling down on creativity, and what they're hearing from the large corporate entities that they, are looking to draw people out of the training that is the VCU Business Schools. They want creativity. Now, when you get in the office and you're perky and make suggestions, I don't know if, everybody's got it all the way down the line, but I think that skill, that understanding, that how do you, make ideas is, so when I would ask the students, the VCU is like, every kind of person is in that business school, and I would ask these young, radiant women, do you feel like you need to dress from, pinstripe suit and really suck it up to look normal? And they said, and this woman said to me, no, my who I am and where I come from and the fact that I represent a community that isn't the guys who are hiring me is what I'm there for, to represent ideas. So we might be the fuck generation, but it's, I don't know. Because I haven't really had a job since 1991. So I've worked for myself, so don't ask me.
Any other questions that you guys have? Yes.
I was just curious how the experience at VCU came about, whether they sought you out, whether this was a program already in place, whether it was something that you saw, the writing on the wall, that you've been watching creativity come out of the woodwork. It seems to me it's breaking down in all kinds of places, not only in self-expression in the workplace, and because I certainly came up in a time when you were expected to dress the part of a woman.
The tie, like the girl with the tie, right? Yeah.
And so I'm just curious whether they just were sort of embracing this, or they were like, we're not doing enough placement, and people are coming and saying we're not ranked high enough. It was how this was driven. I'm just curious.
So the question is, how did the experience with the VCU School of Business happen? Was she recruited, or did you approach them, or just a little context about that?
Well, it was another me and Noah thing, because he was the first and I was the second, and now I'm being replaced by an entire symphony. So this, Ed Greer, who's the dean, and Ken Kahn, who was one of the people who had really built the Da Vinci Center, they felt like they needed to be out ahead of this. So they have been working, and it's got the support. I was in front of the board of trustees a couple of times, and they have their full support that this is what they want, and they're trying to create an environment. And it's there's a commitment in the faculty for rigorous academic training, and then there's people like me who are all about experiential learning. And so there were some weird moments where faculty would say, I can't believe students want to know how what I'm lecturing on is going to be useful. I'm like, you're in a business school. In the art school, I have to do that. But at the same time, there are a lot of faculty that are really. Is there any VCU Business School faculty here? There's a lot of faculty that are totally about experiential learning. They're really committed to internships, and they want their students to be successful. And they feel like this is the edge. What's the brand of VCU? It's the ICA, the School of the Arts. It's what's Richmond? It's craft beer. It's creativity. And so I think they led, and they found me. Ken he came to an exhibit I had at Candela and said, will you, I had worked with him at Da Vinci. I had done some work there, and so he knew me. And so it was great. And they really made it. I'm not a lecturer usually, and so what I wanted was to sit in that atrium and talk to people and make with them. And in fact, there's a little piece that just went into Richmond Magazine today. I spent 4 days in the atrium with a big sign that said the artist in residence is making money, and I had made cash and bought things from people. And they let me do that, They didn't say, what about the Secret Service? They just let me do it. how do I balance gardening and chicken keeping. Have you seen my vegetable bed recently? That's what I'm doing tomorrow is I'm weeding. I really love music and I love reading. And these are not things that I do I don't perform music and I don't write for publication or for an audience. And I can just be I can have pleasure in them. I don't have to look at them as a participant. I can really just be a consumer. And so I think that's really important to find something. We are so Calvinist, Protestant, American, and in reading about making time for creativity and doing a craft, it's always because you'll be better at your work, as opposed to just because you'll have a better life. And but I think don't try to do too many things. I have a long list. I'm old. I do a lot of things, and I think one of the things is, as Diane talks about, is everything is incorporated. It's all there's you put yourself in where you're comfortable, and because one of the things I didn't talk about was in guilds, part of what made somebody an expert at the craft was controlling that global supply chain of your materials, and it was why printers were separate from bookbinders, because they had separate supply chains. Now we order everything from Amazon, and you can order anything. You can sign up for Skillshare and do a million things, but I think maybe doing one or two things at a time, leaving time for love, have pleasure.
I don't know. Is people going to ask me about stocks? Oh, yes.
You talked, I think you mentioned it a couple times, that craft was, and I forget your exact phrase, but it was almost the neglected little sister of the fine arts. Is that
It was the spurned.
I'm sorry?
The disparaged and spurned.
Can you talk a little bit more about that and why, if it's your belief, you feel that it's looked at on a lesser plane?
Are you asking if I think, why I think it's less, or why do I think that it was?
If you do, why?
I don't know. Craft is cool, and I
don't know. I think that the boundary is kind of gone, and craft has taken a lot of things from fine arts, and fine arts have taken a lot of things from craft. So right now, it's the job of an artist to be useful, right? All the calls of proposal are bridge communities, help us do this. It's so, in a way, I think it's all just one big mess. And what craft now is that, that idea is is encompassing, the idea of craft is encompassing the hand, and the action and authenticity. So I would never disparage it. My favorite things are things.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. We appreciate you being here. Volunteer folks, if you're in the room, please come forward. So I just want to bring up all the folks that help make all these amazing events happen. It's a labor of love. It definitely is a labor, but it fills us up as much as it takes our time. So these are some of the folks that are involved with helping Creative Mornings happen. So I'd love to just give them a round of applause. Our next Creative Mornings will be July 20th, so check out that Monday to sign up and grab tickets. And that's all, folks. Thank you.